Broadcasting from the campus of Lynn Benton Community College. We are the Mid-Valley STEM-CTE Hub. I'm your host, Casey, and this is Closing the Gap. Welcome back, Closing the Gap listeners. Today I have the host of the podcast Journey to Launch, Jamila Souffrant, with me on the show, and we'll be talking about how personal finance and math can go hand in hand to create more math confidence for your students. We'll also be visiting topics like return on investment and making smarter decisions about how to go about post-secondary education, and also empowering students to decide what is important to them and how to make decisions for themselves and their financial futures. So join me. This is going to be an exciting one. Hi, Jamila. How are you doing today?
Good. Thank you for having me on, Casey.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. So one of the things that we're talking about in my local area, which is the Willamette Valley in Oregon, is math, and specifically getting students that are in middle school and high school to feel confident in math. And specifically as a money management expert, I was hoping that we could maybe talk to you from the point of view of using personal finance as a way to approach math for young people in a way that is hands-on and it's tactile and it's real. But before we really dive into that, I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit about your business Journey to Launch and how, becoming financially independent has been part of your journey.
Sure. So I have always had this desire to be free, free from the confines of like a commute or a boss, a cubicle. Even as like a little girl, I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't like having anyone telling me what to do. So when I got into corporate America and got a good job, I still had those ideas, but then I didn't know how I would be able to live life on my own terms when everyone around me seemed to just work and you needed money to pay bills. And there was a certain lifestyle that I wanted to have. And it wasn't until I started to work more and I was in my early 30s that I started to think to myself, okay, you had these dreams and ambitions before of not wanting to work forever. Now you're kind of stuck in this cycle. You have a mortgage. At that point, I'd just gotten married. I was pregnant. I was like, but this still doesn't feel right. Like, I know I'm on the path and I'm doing all the right things and I'm making good money in my job in New York City, but I want this to be my life. And so I started to Google and look up how to quit my job, how to be financially free or independent. I didn't really know what those phrases meant, but I Googled them and I came across somehow these blogs and podcasts, not too many, but a couple that were talking about this concept of financial independence. So this idea that one day you could save and invest enough money that you could live off of your investments. And it could be just retirement investments. It doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just like taxable investments or retirement investments. People were aggressively saving and investing over a period of time to reach the status of financial independence. And so I said to myself, wait, this concept, it's not a quick get rich scheme. It seems very like slow, but plausible. And some people are doing it fast, depending on their lifestyle and how much they make. So it's like, why not try that? And so I started to apply what I was learning on the blogs and podcasts to my finances. I had a husband. I was pregnant also when I first discovered this concept. And so it was a conversation. It was a change in terms of how we spent our money and invested, but we got on the same page and we were able to transform our finances and our path. And in the 2 years that we really like buckled down and got serious, we were able to save and invest $169,000 between my husband and I. And I always like to say that's the function of us both working, being together in New York City. So we both had, 6-figure income. So I know that's not a function that maybe everyone can do, but it was definitely a huge step up from what we were doing before. And with that, I started to document my journey. So I said to myself, I'm learning all this from these podcasts and blogs, but I feel like it'd be cool to kind of share what I'm doing and to be accountable to whoever was listening. And so I started to do that, which is how Journey to Launch, the podcast, came about. It was actually first a blog called Mrs. Budget Fab because that's how much into budgeting I was. And then I quickly kind of was like, it's bigger than budgeting. It's like this journey. So switched it to Journey to Launch, started the podcast, did the podcast for a couple years, and was able to quit my job from corporate America to do what I'm doing now full time, which is essentially talking about personal finance and financial freedom and independence. I wrote my first book, which came out in December of 2023, and which goes into those concepts more about how anyone can achieve a level of freedom and independence in their life. And so that's kind of like where I am today.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So I have this hypothesis that the issue of math confidence can be nurtured through the lessons of personal finance, like I was mentioning earlier, because it's one of those things that's so personal and unavoidable. I recognize that personal finance is not just about math skills, but it's also about a mindset. Would you have any recommendations on what are some exercises that educators and parents, caretakers, young people in middle school and high school, things that they can do to set themselves up for exploring math concepts and confidence through the lens of personal finance?
Yeah, I think everything, especially the way I learn and get excited about things, and I know that students, because I have small children myself, they want to know what's in it for them. Like, how does this relate to me? I remember in being in school, and I'm just like, when am I going to use this? Like, what's the point? But luckily for me, I did have kind of this discipline in, it wasn't the actual what I was learning. It was the discipline or the effort I was putting into learning it that would make me successful. So it was the tools that I could apply to learning the concept, even if I thought the concept was like useless, what would help me get through to life, So I think trying to relate why it matters to your students, depending on the age, is important. So, for example, I have 3 kids, 10, 8, and 6. My oldest, he, of course, has the most expensive taste palette. Like, when we go out to eat, he always wants, like, lobster or oysters. I'm just like, excuse me. So, anyway, I always tell him, you need to do well in life because you're going to want to be able to afford these things. And so with that, I'm trying, like, teaching him the value of $1. Like, you have to put effort into things. And so I guess it's understanding what your kids like, and even students, like what they're into and how whatever math concepts you're teaching relates to their world. So, even when it comes to saving and investing, I know that's a very important topic to teach like kids early on because of compound interest and how that works so much faster, and you can accumulate so much more money if you start early. So even as adults need to see this, but showing them like in real time what that looks like on a graph or on a chart, delayed gratification. What does it look like if I give you $5 and you can spend it now, which is fine, but then that's gone. That whatever experience you felt mostly is going to go away right away. Versus, all right, but if you give me the $5 and you tell me I can hold on to it and I can add $1 next week, and then another $1. Let's see how that and so that can start to open up a student's mind to, wait, that's not only learning compound interest, but it's also learning like the impact of delayed gratification and why that matters to me. Because if we do this for 2 months, instead of $5 that I spent on whatever, I could have, let's just say $30 in 6 months, right? Like something that where they can see the difference would be, I think, beneficial and would matter to them. I think also calculating the difference of cost of things. So, for example, like there's an ice cream truck that comes around. Back in my day, I feel so old when I say this, but ice cream was $1. Now, the same ice cream is $4 or $5. And so, sure, if I gave you your money, you could spend it every day on ice cream if you had enough. But if we go to Costco or some, bulk buyer, and we are able to buy the same ice cream for $20, and then you can sell that for even cheaper than the ice cream truck. So you undercut the ice cream truck, but you sell it and you make a profit. How much more money could you have? And so I find that even talking to my own kids that way, like they'll be like, all right, I won't buy that ice cream right now because like I can get that for $2 at Costco. Like, so think about where they like spending their money or time, and related the concepts that you're talking about to them so that they can figure out what that looks like in the real world. So I would say hopefully that helps.
Yeah, I think that helps. And I feel like the entrepreneurial spirit that that idea instills in young people is also very helpful. And the other thing that I'm thinking about is the ability to make choice by learning how to use your personal finances to your benefit. I'm thinking like, you could use your money to buy like a great pair of shoes or great, ice cream, but you could also use that to get out of a situation you don't want to be in. Or you could use it to upskill or move to another country or just not work so much if that's how you're able to set up your finances.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk about some ways that we could get kids into saving or learning about investing in ways that don't require parents of to be of a high socioeconomic status. Like we could talk about like theoretical ways as well.
I remember opening up my mom taking me when I was about 5 or 6 to open up a bank account, a savings account. And she didn't have like a lot of money back then when she did that. But because she was an immigrant and like that was her way of survival, was like being able to save something from what she earned, even if it was like 5 cents, she instilled that in me. And I really think, even though we didn't have a lot of money growing up, like those concepts, me remembering going to the bank and opening up that savings account, and then whenever I got birthday money or anything, like something had to be put away, even if it was like $1. And so that helped when I got more money. Like those working with a little bit prepared me to work with a lot. And so for people who don't have the financial means yet, I think hopefully there's hope that you can build that in yourself and get there one day. But even if you don't have a lot, just the concept of saving, even if it's just 25 cents, I know it seems insignificant, but it's really just building the habit. And so if you're able to, maybe credit unions find like hopefully there's an institution that allows you to open up, even if it's just a savings account that doesn't have a minimum balance where you're not going to get charged to do this. So I would say look at local credit unions. Some of the, brick and mortar, like traditional banks have it, but even online accounts, even that could be, there's a little bit of, barrier for some people if they don't have access to the internet, but to put something away. And even if you can't do any of those things, like put $1 in an envelope once a month, just so you can help to build up that muscle. And again, it's not the amount that you're doing, it's more of you're practicing. Like you have the mindset. So it's also developing the mindset that you are practicing with a little bit until you can do more. And it's not something to be embarrassed about, but it's empowering so that you know that you're, saving for something else. And so I do think that's a concept that you can teach kids, again, whether it is an actual account that they can walk in and like come with you once a month to do or every other week, or if it's just putting it in an envelope, $1 every month or every other week to show them, okay, look what we have. Now we have $10, and maybe that took 2 or 3 months, but you have $10 you didn't have before. And so to start talking to your kids in that way so they can see it. And I think the other major thing with kids nowadays is that money is like virtual. It's invisible for a lot of people because we're just like using things like, everything's quick. We use our phone to charge, even, at the grocery store. And so that concept of feeling money, it feels very made up. And it is made up, honestly. Like they print money when they want. So I think in order to kind of drive home the value of $1, it is talking about, okay, you want this thing, but let's talk about like how long it took mom or dad. And you don't want to do this from a scarcity mind point, but just let's talk about what this takes to buy this. And so I'll give you an example. My kids now, they're getting of the age where they're just like, can you get a new car? Like, can you get a nicer car? I'm just like, okay. And I'm like, so if we get a car, I could get a nicer car or a newer car, but we may not be able to go on vacation for, the next couple summers because we have to pay for this car. So what do you feel like is more beneficial to you? Like the nicer car, or do you like the vacations? And they're like, well, we want to go on vacation. Like if we had to pick one. I'm like, right now we have to pick one. It's not just anything. And so I think that helps them understand. It's not that I can't do it, because they're like, well, you have money now, because they can read and they know what I do for work. They think I'm like super rich. I'm like, I'm not. Like, we are comfortable. Mom, we are comfortable where I can pick you up from school comfortable, but I don't have the money to just go buy a car and like to just do everything you want me to do. But it's talking to them in these ways to say it's like financial freedom and independence is not about like having it all. It's about being able, like you said, to make choices and having options. And so kind of relating like freedom and money more in that way versus the physical attributes and things we can buy with it.
Totally, totally. And I appreciated that a while ago you mentioned that it's a muscle and it's not just something that you can automatically pick up and be really good at. And I think that is not only applied to personal finance, but practicing math in general. It's always, it's a muscle. We're not going to be great at it first. We got to keep going. And also, I think you made a really great point with the virtual money aspect, because we just can't see things anymore in the way that, maybe we used to when you and I were growing up. But that also kind of, I think, is another application for math. Is it's such a concept in classrooms a lot of times where we can't see how it affects us. And marrying those two ideas, I think, is just such a powerful way to bring kids closer to this idea of, I do have power over my life and my situation. And, this is just a class I have to get through. And this is a concept I just have to learn. And it's going to be okay.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
I wanted to recognize also that, personal finance is not a one size fits all journey, and everyone needs to have, their own goals in mind and understand what their own personal needs are for their futures. And I've heard on your podcast a couple times you talk about this, and I was hoping we could kind of get into why we should empower our students through personal finance lessons, and while we're using personal finance as teaching about math, why they should be thinking about their futures and how that can help them ultimately conceptualize these lessons even further.
I think it goes back to this idea of having a growth mindset in areas of your life. So it's not learning. It's not the actual problem. Like, if you put a problem in front of your kids and you're like, again, like why can't I just use my calculator? Like, so for example, my kids, sometimes when they do their math homework, I'm like, let me just quickly check that on the calculator. And they're like, why can't I just do it on the calculator? And I'm like, well, I learned how to do it the first way, that way. And then you'll use the calculator. But it's this idea that you want to like work your brain in a way to where it's a tool that you can use to figure out a problem, whether it's a math problem, a real world problem. It's just you are, getting the dust off. You're like oiling it up so that it's well working. And it's not that you have to get everything right away or understand concepts right away or even get the problem right all the time right away. It's about like how your brain tries to figure it out, and the growth mindset, meaning, even if no matter what, you'll try to figure it out. So I think it's important just for kids in general to adapt that to their learning. So that way, even if they're having problems in math or whatever subject, it's not the problem. It's like, how are we going to work through this until even if, you get to a better understanding that you didn't have when we first started, and like championing that. And when it comes to money and like your future, I think then that applies to anywhere. Like, I try to tell my kids all the time, it's about your effort and like and your problem solving skills. Not that you can solve the problem right away, but like, how are you being creative with that? That's what's going to get you to have a successful life, whatever that looks like, and hopefully money to help provide for your lifestyle. And so, I think going back, I don't like to do this from a scarcity mindset with kids, but like I love when they say like kids are like your little broke best friends. They never have money, but they always want things. And, we probably were all like that growing up. We just wanted things. And then reality sets in. You have to pay for it. So when your kids are asking for things, or when my kids ask for stuff, I'm just like, okay, but that's going to take money, and I can do it up to a certain point. And there's opportunity cost. And if I buy this, maybe we can't buy that, or there's going to be a delay in something. But in your life, think about what you want your life to look like. My kids like love playing the game of seeing nice cars now, and like, oh, my car. I'm like, now, if you really want that to one day be your car, you have to apply yourself. And so I think just talking about it in that way, and then relating it back to you're going to need money. You're going to need to have problem solving skills. You're going to need to have soft skills, know how to interact with people, to kind of play this game of life that we are forced to play. Comes into like teaching them about their future and relating it back to math or money.
Definitely, definitely. How would you suggest that, like students? I mean, sorry, not students. How would you suggest that maybe educators or parents work towards empowering their students to start thinking about those decisions and making them for themselves, so they kind of have an idea of what that tangible thing is they want to use their tools for?
I think for parents, if you're able to give your children like money, like an allowance or just something where they're now you making decisions to whether buy lunch or treats for themselves throughout the week, that's like a good way where you can give them that power of making choice. And so, if you're going to give them, let's say $5 for the week, whatever that is, and now they have to decide, are you going to spend all that on like one thing on one day, or is there a way to like space that out and slowly spend that? So giving them some control over some decisions when they're low risk, where the first time they don't have that control is going to college or having a credit card in their young adult life. It's kind of like you can help them kind of give them decision-making power on the smaller decisions and things that matter. And then, I think teachers, like if there's a way, and even in the classroom, I know for my kids, I think if they do well, they can get a treat right away or a toy at the end of the week, or they can hold on to their points and get something bigger. So to me, it's like the same thing in terms of delayed gratification and accumulating almost like compound interest of that value of the toy to get something better. So teaching them in those ways that are practical with things that they actually want, I think are ways that you can encourage them.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like that also practices them into thinking about making their own choices, even like, getting into a consent kind of realm. It's practicing these personal finance things is also practicing like personal agency in a way that's setting them up for future when they, like you said, when they have bigger problems or bigger things, it's a higher risk. They already have practice going into it.
Right.
One of the things that I think that a lot of people are thinking about when it comes to, and you mentioned it, like university or higher education, and getting to that point, it can feel like such a huge risk financially. You think about going to trade school or even community college or university, and like this huge bit of, well, it's not a bit, it could be really like a lot of debt for students that are taking things on. And um, maybe that's a hindrance for them. And so, from a personal finance perspective, how can we set students up to be successful taking on higher education to then get them the skills that they can use to work towards financial independence?
It would be very important to have these conversations about like what they think they want to do. I think it's such also like it's to like pigeonhole. Because I didn't like this question either growing up. What do you want to be? Because I never knew what I wanted to be. I just knew I wanted to make money. I was like, I don't know. I didn't have like, I was one of those kids. I didn't want to be a doctor or lawyer. Like I may have said that to appease maybe an adult, or I thought that's what I wanted, but I didn't know. I think it's like to ask a kid. Sometimes as adults, we don't even know, right, what we want to do. But I think having a sense of direction is important. So, trying to figure out like what path do you want to travel on? Like I have a sister who's very artistic, more artistic, like she likes to dance. So she's set on that pathway. And so, that was different for me. I was never like into dance. Like I was more academic and knew I wanted to be something with business. But when I thought about my options for school, and so these are the conversations you should have with your children, it's just like, okay, so what do you think you want to do? And what is the best pathway to get you there that won't incur you the most debt? Now, you can go to sometimes like a local community college. You can go to a state school. You can go to a private school. Those all have all different costs. Now, unless you are determined and like if you have the kind of determination and history of, some kids are just like great or do well at school. They get the grades, they pass the test, they're moving forward. So, you kind of send them to like a university. You kind of figure, okay, I think they're going to complete that. Versus some kids, like, like this is just not their thing, or it's harder for them. So thinking about the way you learn, the history of like how you've done in those settings, and thinking about what's the risk reward ratio. What kind of career do you want? And if it's going to be a career that earns a certain amount of money and like there's a cap at that, okay, so what is the degree that you want to get and how much is that going to cost? Can you get that same degree for half or 1/4 of the price? If your cap on earning is going to be less than someone who says, I want to like someday move to New York City, work on Wall Street, and my goal is to earn millions. You may have a different pathway, and you may take on more risk because you expect your reward to be bigger. So I think it's just like trying to figure out, what is it that your kid wants to do? What are some of the options that it's going to take? And then just like logistically and realistically, how can we get you there without paying or going into debt? Because there are some people, like literally they're in the same job, but the debt, like that, the person that they're comparing with against someone else, it's like so much more just because of the pathway they took. Whereas if they knew, wow, I could have got the same degree for 1/4 of the price, would have done that. So it's just comparing your options, understanding the risk to reward, and what kind of career are you actually going for, and like what's the potential to earn income to help you make that informed decision about how much risk and debt you want to take on.
That's great. I think that's such an empowering way to look at it. Because I guess I would have never even thought of that myself. And I think that helps me even on an adult level, and thinking about applying that to someone else that's just getting into school. I feel like that opens up a lot of doors. It's really expansive way of thinking for sure. I noticed that we are coming close to our time, and I just had one final question to ask you. If you could just distill down into like one sentence why personal finance is so important for young people, what would you say?
Personal finance is more than just budgeting or investing. Like, it's part of it, but the real gift and power comes into understanding the way just in general money works. And you need money in this world, in this capitalistic society and world of capitalism. Like, if we're going to participate in it, then we need to understand how it works. And this is more than one sentence, so I don't think I can do it in one sentence. But, ultimately, it is your ticket. Understanding how to manage your money and make it work for you instead of you having to work for it tirelessly is how you'll get to a level of freedom, whatever that freedom looks like for you. It's so important. And the earlier you learn it, the better. That you learn these foundational concepts, spending less than you earn, investing, starting early, all these things just put you in a way better position. So I know personal finance is not always something people like to talk about, but money, it's really just handling your money and knowing what to do with your money and making just sound decisions that can carry you through so you can live the life you want to live.
That's great. Well, I wanted to thank you so much for your time again. And I feel like this was such a great learning opportunity. And yes, thank you.
Thank you, Casey, for such insightful questions.
Thanks for listening to Closing the Gap. This podcast is a production of the Mid-Valley STEM-CTE Hub. If you would like to be part of the conversation, fill out our interest form at midvalleystem.org/closingthegap. If you like the show, follow us on Spotify to stay up to date with the newest episodes. And for STEM news in the Mid-Willamette Valley, follow the Mid-Valley STEM-CTE Hub on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn.